TV, Cynthia Johnson. How are you doing? I'm Rhett Power. You doing all right?
I'm doing great, Rhett. Nice to see you, as usual.
It is. It's nice to see you. We have got Jenny Dearborn on today. She is not just a best-selling author. She's a global thought leader in human capital strategy. She's a venture investor, a film producer, and a fierce advocate for equity in business and education. She's served as in executive roles at major organizations, currently leads people strategy and talent insights at BTS, and has advised over 30 tech startups. Her best-selling books, Data Driven and The Data Driven Leader, reshaped how leaders think about performance and analytics. And our new book, which we're going to talk about today, is The Insight Driven Leader, launches in a couple weeks, and we're excited about that. It ships next week, Jenny?
Yeah, in a couple days.
Couple days. Oh, goodness. So we're excited to have you on here to talk about that today. Thank you for joining us, Jenny.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
I'm going to give it to you, Cynthia, for the first question.
Well, first, I just want to throw it out here. You were named one of the 50 most powerful women in tech. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's amazing. So I just want to, we're in the presence of greatness here. I was just thinking that's amazing. So you were doing all this amazing work. You're clearly very busy. 2 books prior to this. What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, I think it came from a place of frustration that I wanted more progress in the corporate world, in how the humans in a corporation were valued and understood, and their performance was encouraged and measured. I saw people being laid off for reasons that didn't make sense, and companies underperforming and not valuing their people as they should. And I thought if we had a very structured, data-driven and insight-driven approach to measuring human performance and human potential, that companies could be more productive and ultimately more human. So I was starting from that place of frustration and wanting to give something back to the leaders of different corporations.
Yeah, this is such an important topic right now, right? I mean, we don't know where AI is going to take us. We don't know where quantum and agentic AI. I mean, we're at sort of this seminal moment, I think, in history. And I think data and making decisions based on data is getting even more and more critical. It's always been important, but we have so much more data now to make decisions on, I think. And so I think the insight-driven leader is actually really interesting, that the sort of the conversation around that. What does that really mean?
Yeah. I came from a place where thinking if we just had the numbers and we could truly trust that it was 7, whatever the question was, that would be the breakthrough. And then I came to learn through different operator roles at different companies that it wasn't just the number, but what that meant in context, whatever number, whatever piece of data. It was, what do you do with it? What question were you asking? How is that understanding going to influence your behavior and your decisions moving forward? So it wasn't just what is the number, but it was all of the insight around having that number. If you have an employee engagement score of 75, what insight are you getting from that metric to make decisions in your corporation and drive your corporation to better performance and productivity and output and success? And I came to understand through my research that the very, very best companies were not measuring different things. It wasn't that this corporation didn't know what their attrition numbers were and this other corporation did. They both knew their attrition number. At one corporation, having that number was the end of the conversation. And at the best companies, it's the beginning of a conversation. It's the beginning of, well, what do we do with this? What does it mean? Where do we go from here? What policies do we change because that we know our engagement number is 75? how is that different from one region to another region, or with one geography, or with one gender, or with one ethnicity, like, or one level in the corporation? What insight does this number tell us? And that's really where the breakthrough was. For a long time, it was just so hard to measure what was going on in a corporation. And then when we finally got really good across organizations of measuring the output, some companies said, we're done. And the best companies go, no, this is the beginning.
I know Red's going to want to dive into all the details about what the data is, but I have to know first, just from my own perspective on the book, you co-wrote the book.
Yes.
Kelly Ryder, correct?
Yes.
So what are the two lenses between the two of you? So
I asked Kelly to co-author this book with me. I've known her for 10 years, and she's an incredible researcher, and her execution of details is exceptional and not better than anyone I've ever met. Better than anyone I've ever met. So the lens for me was very big picture, interviewing leaders globally and seeing those big picture trends. And she really came in with that detail orientation around the research and understanding technology at the deepest level to understand sort of big picture strategy and how that connects to, the technology changes that are happening on the ground at a detailed level, and how that changes day to day.
How can, and Cynthia knows me too well, I do want to get into some of the other things. Yeah, how do you bridge the gap? How do organizations bridge the gap between business metrics and people analytics?
Yeah, a lot of companies don't do that well. And that's really what I'm trying to get at, is they'll say, a corporation will say, we'll pull reports from our Salesforce or something, our CRM, and we can look at early stage pipe and late stage pipe and close rate and discount rate and what's our, revenue by rep or region or things like that. But they're not pulling that data through into your HR metrics. Your people metrics sit not just in HR, but they sit in every business unit. There's a lot in IT, there's a lot in legal, and corporations are quite siloed in how they look at their human data. And they just look to HR and say, well, what data are you getting from your HRIS or your recruiting systems or your learning systems? And what I'm really an advocate for is pulling together the data across all of your business systems to get a full view of your human capabilities and your total talent picture, which is why we see, really the best organizations are merging HR and IT, because the best HR organizations are so data driven. You really need the insight from the data sources across business units, especially sales, especially engineering, product, customer success, customer support, all of those sources coming together. That's where you can really create models for the maximum, your people productivity and performance.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I'm just thinking of the companies that take the data, have the data, they hear you, they make all the changes, and then they think that they're data driven, but they actually are ending the conversation and doing like what you said. Like, how do you know the difference between the company that's checked the boxes and the company that's actually doing it?
It's not that hard, because when you're asking or you're talking to an organization, when they are truly data and insight driven, they start with business metrics, like what are the lagging indicators of your business metrics, revenue, margin, supply chain, things, those big picture lagging indicators. And then they work backwards into systems and capabilities and, who you hire and what programs you have. And so some organizations will say they're data driven, and they start with the support functions and they work out. and the best organizations start with the business metrics, the customer facing metrics, and they work backwards into their human capability metrics. And so you can find out pretty quickly by just how they have that conversation. Are they talking about the number of people that they hired in every quarter and what their attrition metrics are and their customer, and their employee engagement? Or are they saying, we know that the humans that we have are driving this revenue, this margin, this product growth, and they start with those business metrics.
Why do you think we haven't gotten this right?
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing that we as humans are living longer, and we're healthier longer, and we're gonna live to 100. 50% of us are gonna live to 100 years old. So we don't see the turnover in a lot of functions that we did lots of years ago, because people have these wonderful long careers. So they kind of hold on to ideas probably longer than is healthy for a corporation. So we don't see the experimentation. There's a lot that could go wrong in the people function, and it's very visible. When you are wrong, when you wrong an employee, it becomes, you're canceled in social media. And so people are reluctant. It's a lot of times the people function really is about compliance and keeping us out of the front page of the news, and just do the minimum so we don't get in trouble and we don't break the law. And, it's better to be safe than sorry. So a lot of corporations start from that place of compliance, safety, and fear.
Yeah.
And it really takes a very bold company that either has nothing to lose because their back's against the wall, or they've got a lot of margin and they got a lot of cash flow, and they have an entrepreneurial spirit, and they really have a spirit of innovation and risk taking. And they say, let's try it differently. Like, what's the worst that can happen? We feel comfort in taking risk and driving change. So
who's doing that right now?
Extremes. Most people are in the middle where they're scared. So if your back's against the wall, or you're super rich, like a lot of margin and a healthy balance sheet, you'll take risks. And in the center, not so much.
Who's doing that right now? Is there any? Sorry.
Yeah, the organization that's probably the most famous right now is Microsoft. Kathleen Hogan, who was their chief people officer for a lot of years, 10 years or something, just stepped down, and they have a new chief people officer, but really took a lot of risks and drove a lot of technology changes, and, really became kind of that gold star, level that everyone is trying to achieve.
Yeah, you just maybe changed my entire introduction, because you're like, when your back's against the wall, you'll be with the risk. Yes, that's the response. That's the appropriate response. How do you get buy-in? Like, you're the one with your back against the wall. But maybe everyone else doesn't feel it. I don't know.
Yeah. Again, it's your comfort level with risk. I have been able to get buy-in from business leaders in my career as an HR professional, because I've gone back and forth between being a sales rep, carrying a quota, to being an HR, back to sales, carrying a quota, back to HR as a practitioner, back and forth. So I had some extra credibility with the business, because I came from the business, and could speak the language of, business metrics, and could bridge that gap. So what we see is a lot of people in HR being successful because they came from the business. And, people who rose through the ranks of HR, maybe not getting to that top job because the CEO is saying, I'd rather go grab somebody from the business and bring them across horizontally, because then they'll have the credibility and the influence and the impact with the organization. So that's one way, because you come from the business. Another is, having business degrees, and, maybe the traditional path that we were taught, I'm 55. So, really, really long time ago, they would say, if you want to go into HR, you need to have a psychology undergrad or a counseling or social work kind of major as an undergrad. And now we're really looking for people with, business or economics or data or, some sort of applied mathematics or something like that, to really have that grounding, because the best heads of people organizations are not the ones that are just, they feel so much, but they're ones that are like, I get the data. I understand the data structure. I understand how to drive change from a position of data.
Yeah.
You
want
mind
to?
if I
I knew you had a follow-up. I figured you had a follow-up on that.
No, yeah, because when you describe data, it's so clear to me with the large organization, like how that would apply. But what about a smaller company? Is there like a size you should be at?
It's more about the culture and the willpower of the organization. So you can do a heck of a lot in Excel, really, if you know what you're doing and you are aligned as an executive team about what you want to achieve and how you're going to go about doing it. If you decide, like, we only want to, hire people that, fit a particular structure or analysis of like what we're really looking for, there's really inexpensive tools that you can go out and buy, or even that are free, to be able to assess talent, or assess the job structure and the organizational design. You don't have to be big. It helps if you're looking for, a big company has just a ton of data to mine, and they can make very, very tailored changes. But you don't have to do it that way, right? You can do it quite simply on one spreadsheet.
This is so interesting. What does it look like when you embed this into sort of daily, when a leader embeds this into daily decision making versus just the big strategy sessions? How does that change sort of the daily work?
Yeah. So on a daily basis, it's going to make your people function less reactive. A lot of times people organizations are, someone from the business will say, I need a new sales rep. Go get that. Or, I seem to have a lot of people quitting. Can you figure out why and put some program in place so that people don't quit? Okay, go do that. Or there are so many little requests that come, and an HR business partner could feel incredibly gratified by serving that need and always being there on the spot to serve that need. Big company or small, it's a trap that HR people fall into, and that the business encourages HR people to fall into by asking those questions and being so needy. And so on a daily basis, being more structured, you can say, I hear you. I hear your need. Let's go back to our strategic plan and say your need is going to be solved when I focus on this bigger thing that we're rolling out. Those little tiny problems will go away. You could put out all these little tiny fires, or you could get to the source of it to understand, we're hiring the wrong profile. That's why people keep quitting. We're hiring people who are overqualified or underqualified or not the right profile, whatever. And that's why they have the wrong, that's why they have really low engagement, because we just didn't even, we keep training people, but then after we train them and invest in them, then they still leave. Well, why is that? Well, we have the wrong job description. Like, let's get in front of it and prevent the problem from happening. And you can do that in a more structured, sort of analytical way.
I'm actually curious then, the job descriptions, because a lot of companies are they're creating templates of a lot of this stuff, right? Is that, that's like the opposite of what you should be doing. Like, right? That's the, or you.
Well, it's okay to have a template as long as it's accurate, as long as you are actually hiring for the skills and competencies and behaviors and attributes and whatever that you need to accomplish those tasks. So I think what's happening in terms of templates is we used to have, in a lot of places, we still have a job, and a job is like a bucket of skills and stuff that you do to achieve an output. And if you can take that bucket of all the stuff you're supposed to do that's in a category of an envelope called a job, and you say, well, what is the bottom, third of the work, and can we automate that away to AI? Can we systematize that and put in processes in place so that that human doing that work can sort of come up a level, and we automate away, and we say, well, what are the outputs that are needed in that job moving forward? And so now sort of jobs are at a higher level, and maybe more impactful, and the more tactical and the more manual stuff is being automated away. And that's fine if that's a template, but it's got to be current and operational and accurate and, completely aligned to what is the strategy that we're trying to achieve? What are the goals and the outputs that we're measuring ourselves against?
I want to go back to something you said earlier. You talked about how a lot of the IT and the tech teams are integrating with HR. I'm actually working with a client right now where we're doing that.
Yeah.
And that's been difficult. Do you have any advice for teams thinking about making this move and how that integration could be more seamless and actually work?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's those kinds of org changes are very human capacity dependent. So if you have a leader of IT who is deeply empathetic to the human experience, really understands that whole talent life cycle, can answer all of the questions around coaching and leadership and motivation and, HR systems and et cetera. Well, okay, we're ready. If we have a leadership change, we could ask that person who leads IT to take on the people function with a lens towards integrating the data stack across, with really strong first lieutenants in HR for talent management and comp and ben and learning and development and the various sort of sub functions. So it's really based on the people that you have. I would not recommend putting out a job description and hiring an executive search firm that says, my IT leader just quit and my people leader just quit. Why don't we just put them together into one and go find that person who can do both? I don't think you'd be able to find that person. But if you have change internally and so much credibility with one leader, why not combine them? Either have IT go into, HR, the other way around, whatever. I've seen that happen lots of times. So I've seen marketing organizations and people functions merge because of the capability of that one person leading it. And then when that person leaves, they split it apart again because they know, oh, that was just a unicorn. We're not going to be able to find that again. So, but it's wonderful to see the creativity that CEOs have in sort of flexing things back and forth.
Yeah. In this case, it does make sense, but I think it's an interesting question about doing that. That a lot of people are thinking about how to integrate those two things because they are interdependent so much. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, they sort you see that in other places. It becomes a one-off, one time, and then a kind of an experiment, and then you do it enough, and it becomes sort of best practice. So we saw that maybe 15 years ago when the first company put an HR shared service together with a finance shared service. And then they started having HR, IT, and finance. So all of G&A shared services in one service center. And then they took that and they put that in a low cost location. And then they, sort of systematized all of those admin processes, and it's worked great. And now that's a best practice. So, but when it first happened, we were like, oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah. Interesting.
Do you have any case studies of implementing this? I would love to.
So there's 35 case studies in the book, and lots of examples of companies that have tried pieces of it, companies that have tried this and have failed miserably, and those are in the book. And then companies that have put together a whole system. So there's plenty of companies that have done some really remarkable things and have some great results.
I mean, sometimes you learn more from the failures, right? Or at least you feel better about them. You're like, oh, me too.
And the failures are, I would say, when it hasn't worked out, it's typically through a lack of trust and a lack of influence and communication between different organizations, and when different organizations in a corporation are siloed. So you could have an incredibly intuitive people function that is very connected to all of the business data that's happening. And when there is a problem in, sales in one region, and when those leaders don't loop in the people function, you'll see them off wasting time and spiraling and things like that. And then they finally pick up the phone, and the people function is going to say, oh, I know exactly what's wrong, and why it's happening. So a lot of times it's the people analytics team really should, which is also a different hypothesis I have, which I think that the HR leaders of the future will come from people analytics. Whereas a bunch of years ago, it was the comp leader rose to the top. And I really think it's people analytics moving forward. And when a company has a very strong people analytics function, then typically that's the sign of a really, really healthy corporation that really understands the value of the people and how to optimize them.
So I hate the time is up almost, but I have one final question. What's the one mindset shift that you want every reader to walk away with from reading the book?
Yeah, I would say it's about partnering and collaborating between the CEO and the CHRO. And that relationship sets the tone for how the entire organization sees that function and the value that function is able to bring. So when the CEO and the CHRO are just finish each other's sentences and have that incredible relationship, the HR function is at the table. It's strategic, it's impactful, it's efficient, it's driving business metrics incredible. And when regardless of the people, it's that relationship, because you could have an incredible, and I have case studies in the book where an incredible CEO CHRO relationship where it's like that CEO change, everything in HR is the same, but that new CEO says, why are you in all these meetings? Shouldn't you stay in your lane? Why? I don't need your input in this strategy conversation. And so then all of a sudden the quality and the input of the people function goes down, and it just starts to, deteriorate. So it really is the relationship between the CEO and the CHRO that drives the entire structure.
That is so true. The book is The Insight-Driven Leader, How High-Performing Companies Are Using Analytics to Unlock Business Value. Jenny Dearborn, it is your third book, and you co-wrote this with Kelly Ryder. Thank you for being on the program today. Where can people get the book?
Any place online that books are sold, and in a few Barnes and Noble, but anywhere online.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you for being on the program, Cynthia. Good to be with you again today.
Good to be with you again, of course.